My name is JohnLovesAnime here. The microphone is having some technical issues, but for the meantime, I'm going to be doing it with a lot until the microphone gets fixed. But how is everyone doing today? How's OffKai been doing?
Good.
It's very good. I'm very glad to hear that. So let me introduce myself. My name is JohnLovesAnime, and I am a VTuber interviewer in the VTuber community. And I've been doing this for the past 2 years, conducted about 300 interviews, and interacted with many VTubers, or as my mom would say, that I interact with anime characters for real life. So, where do I start? So, I started Otaku Talks, which is the name of my show, which the premise is me, the otaku, having a conversation with anyone that I bring into the show for you to get to know your favorite content creator and for me to make some new friends. Because as an interview, you learn about the person that you are hearing the answers, and for me to also to gather the information and for me to learn of the person that I'm speaking with, especially if I would be interested of their music or their gaming let's plays or even making games or any of that sorts. So Otaku Talks is essentially just being the otaku myself, just talking to anime characters. And I started Otaku Talks back in March of 2020, when the pandemic hit it and a lot of us were furlonged, and I thought to myself one day, oh, well, I have some more free time, so why not I, do something that I've always been meaning to do, and that was for me to get back into content creation, which I started back in 2006, making very cringe videos, which for those who remember the old days where you would rant about Naruto and the anime fillers, that was the videos that I've done, and to this day it is unavailable. I still have the video, but no one will see this because I don't want to have you see the cringe that was my old channel, But that was where I also was introduced to VTubers. I've watched Kiss no Ai, Yamato, even people would say the annoying orange was a VTuber. But I was always wondering about, well, what is a VTuber? What makes a VTuber? And I looked around and I realized that there wasn't any interviews about VTubers, or anyone does any coverage about VTubers. And I thought to myself, I want to know more about the world of VTubing. So I thought of doing interviews out of me wanting to learn about VTubers, but also for me to make friends and have interactions with anybody that I have interest of learning about what they do, whether it's music and games and such. So with my experience as an interviewer, within these past 2 years has been extraordinary, because I've interacted with teachers, I've interacted with professors, I've interacted with game developers, music artists, rappers, even many other professions I've never even heard of, and interacting with anybody that's from around the world. Staying in my room, learning about, someone from Spain, or someone from Japan, or someone from France, or even from the European nations. It was something that I grasped of all that knowledge and excited to learn about any of my guests. And Otaku Talks was also a way for me to, be open of learning of those things I had never heard of the world. Because VTubing, back then was a very niche community, but as years progressed, 2020 when we had the big boom, that world expanded. And it has more expanded, to this year, where we now have a panel about VTubing, even a whole convention about meeting people offline, meeting your favorite VTubers, you know. So I want to do a little survey right now. So raise your hands if any of you have heard about VTubers. Raise your hands.
Wow.
All right.
I'd be surprised if they
Yeah, it's like everyone.
What? No, I haven't heard about VTubers. Tell me all about it.
Yeah, it's like I know about the VTubing. You know, I know VTubers. So, but for me, I didn't know about the world of VTubers. And these interviews, when I started in March of 2020, it was a way for me to learn about that world of VTubers, what it is, how it works, what is the structure, and how this whole VTubing works. And with that, which I'm very nervous, which I do apologize to everyone. It's my first time doing IRL, so I'm very much like being scuffed today. You know, because like streams, I'm also scuffed with my streams. So, you know, doing IRL panel is also very scuffed. But, you know, with being an interviewer, you know, I also, let me take a drink of water. Hydrate.
Yeah.
Don't worry, don't go to my Twitch channel and go to my channel point. You're like, you know, hydrate, redeem. No, don't worry, don't do that. But
It's free.
yeah, it's free. It's only free today. Tomorrow you have to pay 1,000 points. You know? So,
1,000 points?
oh, that's
It's 1,000 points? Is it actually 1,000 points on your Twitch?
well, it's actually 500, but I'm inflating it now so that way nobody knows it's just 500 points. You know? Because that'd be bad. And imagine it's like 500 points, but you can just get that within like 1 minute and be like, okay, cool. Yeah.
have a cooldown?
The way I forgot about cooldowns because I'm like, I've always eager to do cooldowns. I wanted to do cooldowns, and then I forgot about cooldowns, and I'm like, oh. Well, I guess I gotta drink about 35 cups today. I mean, what was that? No, no, please don't do that to me. I don't want to. Because I love to do Niku low key, but I'm not well. You know, why not? Just for in person. I'll do this for free. You know. Let me go. Niku ni. Thank you. Don't worry. No main outfit because I left it at home. Thank God. You know. No, but. To go back in topic, you know, with Otaku Talks, you know, it was something that I wanted to do and learn about VTubing. And with the first aspect, the first thing to know about how it is to be an interviewer is writing down questions, because each guest that you talk to has a different background, has a different origins, have a different, you know, hobby, activity, something they love to do, different designs, different reasons of why they become a VTuber. So writing down questions always helps because it makes you organized, and as well as for you, sometimes myself, I sometimes forget, you know, like I'm guilty of that. So I always write down and practice and rehearse of what I would like to ask of my guest before they come on to the show. You know, that's first and foremost. The second thing that I've learned of how I was able to do interviews is time manage. Because my show usually is about 2 hours. You know, because I love talking, I love hearing, you know, the answers to any of my questions, or hearing about some of the stories, you know, like there was some interesting things I've learned from my guests, you know, where they've come from, what food they ate, you know, the design, some accessories on their outfit, like what does it mean? What is their story? What is the significance of having that said design? Like why they become a bunny VTuber, why they became idle, and within those 2 hours is something I structured that I love doing. And if you do more than 2 hours, it's always okay to take breaks, hydrate, stretch, go to the restroom, something like that. So because trust me, like me sitting down here for about over 2 hours is tiring, my legs and all that stuff, and I'm like, stretch, like it's always good to time manage in terms of conducting your shows or even interviews or even talk shows. Which also the next thing of how to do your shows is preparation. Because sometimes, with my guests, I love to do a 30-minute call to prep, what's gonna happen, like whether it's technical or, double checking if some of the questions are okay to ask, or even of how, the genre runs and everything. It's always good to double check before you press that live button. Because sometimes I press that live button and everything gets prepped, and next thing you know, I muted my mic and I didn't realize it, and I talked for 30 minutes and I'm like, and then someone in the chat is like, John, you have your mic muted, and I'm like, what? Oh, my bad. I'm sorry you haven't heard of what I was saying for the past 30 minutes, but you heard my guest, but not me. But it's always good to self-prep, and to double-check things. And sometimes stuff happens. And when stuff happens, my next step is run with the stuff. Run with it. Don't let the stuff, hurt what you do on your streams. Just let it happen. Like if you somehow, like let's say you fall off the chair, you'd be like, oh, I'm sorry, my chair just somehow didn't want to cooperate with me today. Or that there was some malfunction, just play it as a joke. Because sometimes, it could be a running gag. I mean, it has happened to me. Like, my chair, sometimes it falls backwards. Or even like when I'm taking a drink, I just accidentally, kind of like spilled on my equipment. It happens, just play it along and just enjoy it, just have fun with it. And with that being said, and this is a little bit about my experience as an interviewer, is that I really appreciate the guests I've had on my show, because each of them, brings a story, and a lot of them have always, teach me something new that I've never heard of. Some people teach me about, how it is, to be a teacher, or some of them teach me how it is to be an officer, or even some that says how to be a cook. I'm always eager to learn, and to be an interviewer is also to be open-minded of who you interact with, because all of these stories can also help you in terms of, hearing anyone's occupation, their hobbies, their favorites, their favorite VTuber, why they become VTubers. And I just enjoy every bit of it. And it is something that, as an interviewer, is always surprising to me. And even right now, like if I was streaming, I would be like very, very excited and very much like, not nervous. But since I'm like in a room with people in here, I'm like, oh, it's different. Like I'm very nervous. But I enjoy seeing new faces and even old faces, even familiar faces. It's also a good experience of doing a panel in person, and I just love doing this panel, and I'm very excited to do talking about my show of Otaku Talks. And I do apologize for being nervous in this stage. I very apologize.
Doing amazing.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you. Thank you. And if you have any questions, within any of my talks, I would highly encourage just stop me along the way and be like, John, I have a question. I would love answering questions. You know, whether it's interviews or anything about being an interviewer or just anything in general of like, you know, streams and such like that. Which, yes.
Yo, so I know like you're talking about like borrowing the YouTuber, but like I don't think you would like properly explain like the extent of that, like how much because it is from somebody you know who doesn't do that often, it's just like a little light center. The amount of videos you do in just a week basis, I don't know, it's kind of insane. I just wondering where you get that much.
Well, that's a very good question. When it comes to like interacting with VTubers, I always love to talk to said VTuber that I would like to interview, like in messages, you know, get familiarized with them, you know, getting a vibe check, you know, seeing how, you know, how they are and, you know, then get to know them a little bit, you know, that way it makes them comfortable, you know, to talk to interviews. Because sometimes, you know, when you hear interviews, it's like, oh, this is gotta be a job interview. Oh my goodness. And I assured them, like, you know, it is not a job interview. I'm not gonna, you know, hire you to do a job and so forth. No, this is an interview where I will talk to you as a friend, you know, just chilling and getting to know you and getting to know why you become a VTuber. And scheduling and getting that free time is also something important that I've learned, because back when I started, you know, interviews, it was very difficult, especially with time zones and converting them. And some of them are like 8 hours apart. Some of them are 16 hours apart. Even some of them is like over 24 hours apart, you know. And how to handle with those time zone conversions is always beating that middle ground. And sometimes, you know, I plan them within my work schedule because I also work at my full-time job. I usually do them as my off days, but sometimes also do it like within like after work and then do like an hour, you know, prep, and then you'll just do the interviews, you know. It's also accommodation as well to the said VTuber from wherever you're interviewing the VTuber, because again, time zones is very tricky, you know, especially, you know, if you're converting Pacific to Korean time zone or to Australian time zone. It is very tough to meet the middle grounds, because someone's morning is your night, or your night is their mornings. And it's always tough. And I always like, you know, have talking with guests and hard to schedule. And I've learned, you know, that there's always gonna be like some middle ground, and I use some of my days off to, you know, accommodate, you know, to anyone's time zones, and even able to schedule like 2 times because, you know, just more or less organizing and accommodating to everyone's time zones. Which I hope I answer your question. You know, I'm sorry, I kind of dragged a little bit of that. So, but as well of how to organize said schedules is also of learning your limits, because me, sometimes I go over my limit, and sometimes I schedule like 2 to 3 interviews a day, you know, and that's nuts. You know, that's basically like, you know, each 2 hours is an interview. That's like about 6 hours of interviews, and sometimes it's like, you know, going crazy and so forth. Know your limits in terms of scheduling your guests or scheduling a collab even, because sometimes, you know, going over, it makes you mentally exhausted. Have some days off as well, to have like a mental break of relaxing, and then having like, you know, some off days where you could just, you know, do what you want to do and relax. And I've learned that, you know, with doing like, you know, 2 interviews a week, you know, 1 each of my days off, compared to when I did back then, which was like, you know, 2 interviews a day, and it's like 4 days a week. It's also good to, you know, organize and have some free time for yourself as well, because real life stuff and your health is very important. First and foremost is your health, whether it's mentally or physically. it is very important to have your health as your priority over anything. The next thing of what I've learned as an interviewer is that each time that I talk to somebody, sometimes I go a little over the limits. And that's okay, because sometimes you learn about the guest and you want to learn more about them. And I've always like go over 2 hours sometimes because I'm invested of one story. I'm invested of like what they will have to say. And I've always, and I'm sorry I'm repeating a little bit of like what I'm saying, just very nervous as I mentioned again. But each of the VTubers has helped me within what I do as an interviewer. But with that being said, sorry, I do apologize. Thank you. Yeah. So, I could do that. Okay, so the VTuber interviews really is. Oh, okay. I was like, I'm saying, is the microphone like something more technical? Huh?
It's good. We fixed it.
Oh, is it? Wait.
Oh, it's not?
No. I was like, wait.
It's just your voice. I was like, we were with the guy. It looks like it's working.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I was like, wait a minute. Is the microphone? No, I'm going to yell. I'm going to yell and hopefully they hear. No worries. Technical difficulties also has happened on streams. It has happened to me. Sometimes my webcam malfunctions and I have a green screen behind me and sometimes not the green screen's disappeared, I disappeared and I became I just Thanos snapped, like I'll be like, no. Exactly, the VTuber poof where you have a colored screen and you try to chroma key and sometimes parts of the outfits of the model, it's the same color as the background and they just also disappeared and then next thing you know you just pixelate and it's just Thanos snapped. It has happened. Even myself included, I have a green screen. But also as well, with that, also adding to the time management, for those who's using OBS Studios, there is a timer on the bottom left, on the bottom right corner that tells you how long have you been streaming. That I also use as a way for me to count how long I'm doing an interview and also how long I will ask a question or how long I want to go with a topic. That corner of the OBS Studio will help you a lot. For those that don't know about that timer on the OBS Studio on the bottom right corner when you go live, that will also help you on time manage. Sometimes I have my phone, sometimes it kind of tells me oh, I'm 30 minutes in, okay, let me just change a topic. Sometimes I don't pay attention to my phone and sometimes I go a little bit over, but that's fine. Always have a natural flow of how you transition into a next question. Don't, when you ask a question, sometimes, someone talks and then you interrupt and be like, well, what is the next question? What is the next question? No, just let it natural flow when you ask the next question. If you go over a time limit, that's fine. Just let it, pass by and then transition to the next question. Reaching out is also a next important thing of being an interviewer, because you might watch a VTuber. For example, I'll take Phoebe-chan. I watched Phoebe-chan with her music and her being transforming into a 2.5 VTuber. I watched her content and I was like, I'm very interested of learning more about Phoebe-chan. How does she do her music? How does she does some behind the scenes? And there's always gotta be either a business email, or if they all explain, like, for business inquiries, send a DM. It's always good to message them, be like, hello, I hope you're having a good day. I am an interviewer called the Otaku Talks, and I am interested to learn about you in terms of your career and what you do as a VTuber. Would you be open on your next availability to come onto my show and to be interviewed? And that also leaves open opportunities to put your foot out the door to any VTuber that you would like to talk to, that you would like to learn. Just put your foot in the door and learning about that said VTuber. There are many VTubers out there that sometimes that we don't even know.
There's a mic on the floor.
Oh,
Careful.
I'm so. Let me just move this over there. I don't want no.
I know sound equipment is very expensive.
I'm like, no. Okay, this be over there. Not gonna touch. Not gonna hit you. Stay there.
It's not gonna move yet.
Yeah, stay there. Okay. So, thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, also, equipment. Thank you for helping me. Equipment is also key of being an interviewer. You don't need to buy the most expensive microphone, like first and foremost, like, as an interviewer, like beginning, don't buy like the most expensive microphone. See if you are interested of being an interviewer, but also that you would like to stream yourself, buy some affordable microphone, or even if you want to be a VTuber, the most affordable webcam. There are other options that you can buy that you would test the waters, like, if streaming is for you, or if interview is for you, or even doing a talk show. Even as a PNG tuber, just be on a PNG is also a good way to see if streaming is for you, that you don't want to be on webcam but want to see how streaming is. A PNG works absolutely fantastic, and I will say, like, I have my model myself, which guilty I haven't used, in a while, but when I do, I sometimes use the model. Like, if let's say I'm not prepped, doing my webcam, I use my model as well to do interviews, or even go in VR chat and go interview someone from the VR chat world, that some, have done content over there. There's always other venues that you would like to do interviews. And let me drink some water. Hydrate. Let me see how many hydrate redeems. Was it like 4, 3? I don't know. I lost count. Next thing you know, there'll be a bunch of cups here and be like, hydrate, hydrate, hydrate. Like, these are all free today. Next time it'll cost the channel points. So, sure. Right.
I know, I won't name it, but I've had friends that have gone on interviews that have gone badly.
Right.
And so what is your kind of do's and don'ts for picking questions?
Sure, that is a very good question. The do's and don'ts of picking questions, because as Fry first mentioned, was, to write down questions, and even like be on calls with them 30 minutes before and go over the questions, even send them the list of questions. It's always good to double check, what you guest would like to answer. The do's is to double check for them. Give them the 100% respect of like what you would like to ask of them. Ask them, hey, said VTuber, is this question okay? And then you ask them the question. If they said yes, then that is like an okay for them to ask you that question. But if they said, with that same question, if they said, no, I prefer not to answer that question, then you would leave that question to the side and don't ask that question. Because it's always good, consent is key when it comes to asking your guests questions. Give them the respect when it comes to saying, no, I don't want to answer these type of questions. Yes, I would like to answer these type of questions. If you kind of hinted and see if you ask a question and they said yes, but they kind of like stumbling when they said yes, then I take that as also a no, because it's also how comfortable a guest would like to answer a question. So it's always good to double check and double ask them and make a note. Okay, guest doesn't want this question asked, or they don't like these type of questions, or to avoid asking any of these. It's always good to make notes of what your guests like to talk about, what topics they do, what topics they don't. It's always good to have proper etiquettes when it comes to properly ask someone a question. And I do apologize for those that had bad experiences, but to make sure that everything is, good with questions, always double check with the guests, what are the okays and what are not the okays. And make notes of it. That way each guest is different. Each guest don't like to answer some questions. Always make notes of that and always repeat. Yes.
Do you tend to take inspiration from other interviewers or watch podcasts about people interviewing other people on their podcasts?
Yes. For me, when it comes to interviews, why I done interviews, it was more because I grew up not talking to a lot of people. I was very antisocial. So doing interviews is helping me to be open to talk to people. But there has been podcasts that I have watched that I take inspirations from, trash taste. I also inspired from that. Even from my interviewer peers, like Domotica Thinks, Toki Interviewer, VTuber Talks. A lot of those interviewers also are inspirations for me because each interviewer does their interviews differently, and that helps me to help what I can do and what I can improve on and what I can do on my show. So a lot of those inspirations is not only from podcasts, but also from my peers in the interviewing scene is also an inspiration. Even my guests, an inspiration, because a lot of them give me advices, or even some of them give me feedback. Maybe I need to improve on how I ask questions, or maybe don't drag a question longer. Feedback also helps an interviewer because it helps you to see what you need to work on, what you need to see what needs to be improved, and how you yourself can able to, do better in the next interview. Yes. If there's any more questions, don't hesitate to raise your hand or even tell me I have a question. I'm always eager to answer any questions. So. Also, as well, the next advice, and I really, really want to say this advice is very important, that I've noticed as well of how, that I've been doing interviews, is don't be afraid of, reaching out to anyone that you would like to, ask an interview with, Oh, what? Huh? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were pointing this way. I'm wait.
Yeah, check out OffKai.
Yeah, check out OffKai Expo. Yeah. Oh, okay.
How do you choose who you want to interview? How do you decide, or how do you reach out?
How do I choose of who to interview?
Yeah.
It's always reaching out for anyone that either I'm a fan of their music, I'm a fan of their content, or something that I've seen a tweet or stream, or even recommendations of past guests or the community was oh, we would love for you to interview this person, or oh, I recommend some of my friends that you could interview, it would be okay to reach out. A lot of times it's either I'm very interested of learning of that said VTuber, or it's just words of recommendation from anyone in the community. And I love that because it's people want me to also learn of other VTubers, and it's a really big ocean. I am this one fish in this big ocean with many fishes all across, and a lot of them are still like undiscovered. And I love to like go to TikTok, YouTube, Twitch, any kind of social media because some VTubers they're all exclusive on some platforms. Even some in Facebook gaming I've interacted that are only for Facebook. It is okay to go out into other social medias and learn about different VTubers that maybe you never heard of. And I always go to those places as well for me to reach out to those that are not on Twitter, or maybe some that are not on Twitch. And for me to ask them like, oh, how was your experiences on those platforms? And that's also how I reach out, is just more or less just going to different social medias and different places of the internet that VTubers, even Bibbly. I don't know. Am I saying it correctly? Bibbly? What is it? Bilibili?
Yeah,
I don't know. I'm trying to say like, is it Bilibili or Bilibili? I don't know. I can't, my tongue twisted. Sorry. Either of those, is how I kind of find VTubers to interview. Just more or less just explore and kind of look, and if I see anyone, I'm like, oh, I would love to interview you because I find your design very cool, or I find your content very cool. Yes.
And I know like some certain podcasts like they'll sometimes like even after they ask the question, they'll always sometimes they'll like try to expand on that same topic. Do you tend to do that, or do you just tend to like just move on to the next question?
Yes, that is also important. If there is a question and then that answer, like how someone answers, interests you, it is okay to do like a follow-up question. Like kind of expand on what their answer is, because it's always something that it intrigues me. Like there's some guests that I've asked, like let's say why did you become a VTuber, or what is the inspiration of your design? And sometimes they talk about oh, this is kind of representation of myself and my imagination, or even some that says oh, this is like kind of like my take on like how being a Neko or bunny girl. And then I'm like, okay, what about like these accessories that you have on, like do they have any kind of significance or a story behind them? It's always cool to ask follow-up questions because it also helps you to expand some of their lores or expand some of their ideas and their inspirations of like what they do and the designs, or anything that you find them intriguing of how they answer that said question. Like I asked a VTuber, there was one time I asked a VTuber where their design was a firefly, and I asked them like, why did you become a firefly VTuber? And they said like, oh well, there's a lore that I am like a god and all that stuff. And I'm like, okay, well, how is the story of the lore of how you come to be? It's always something that also helps on learning more, and as well as for the audience to learn about that said VTuber, because the key point of being an interviewer is also for your audience to grasp on the information that the VTuber has talked about themselves, because many of the people in the audience probably don't know of that said VTuber, and they're like, oh, that's pretty cool, I love the design, or I love their voice. Some that do singing performances on my show, like, oh, I love their songs, or I love their gaming let's plays, or I just love their energy. It's always something that gives the audience a taste of that said VTuber and be like, oh, I want to see more of what they can do. So I'll go check them out after an interview. I'll go to their channels or go on their Twitter account, and I'll go follow on their future adventures. And I hope I answered your question. Thank you. Yes. Sure. Yes. Right. So how do I do my research process of the said VTuber? Well, how I look into a VTuber and research like how to form my questions is usually like let's say like their bio, because sometimes a VTuber's bio kind of gives them like oh, I am let's say a succubus from the seventh hell, or I am an ice princess, or I am a firefly from the Yukaza. It kind of gives you like a little bit of a question of their background, and sometimes their LinkedIn's or even like their channels, like the Twitch channel, maybe their content or their clips. Clips is very important as well, of like their energy and how they do said thing, like like oh, there's a scuff, like how they react to that scuff, or maybe they had a funny moment, or even like on YouTube, like what do they do, covers, do they do gamings, do they do like let's plays as well, like a lot of those as well also can help with your research, because that way it expands like what other stuff and talents and skills and contents that they do, and that way you could have that as your questions. You're like, oh, I noticed that on your YouTube channel you do covers. When did you start making music? Or I noticed that you did rapping. Like, how does the process of being a rapper takes? It also expands of like their content, and also for the viewers to learn of like expanding of like, let's say, cover, like some behind the scenes of a cover, or some kind of like what happened in that said clip, like what happened like before that, or how did that happen. And then what to avoid of the questions is like, again, there's some VTubers that they don't like specific questions, or even some that said like, when you interview me, I would love to interview as like you're talking to like the VTuber, but not as the creator. And also that also comes into play, like how a VTuber likes to be conducted in an interview, and that also comes in play of like doing a background check, and making sure like they're comfortable of like asking questions, and how to be interviewed, and how you ask the questions and things like that. Which I hope I answered your question. Yeah. But with that in mind, it also is important as well to, that sometimes, with, interviews, like myself, I get stage fright, and I done public speaking, when I was in college, but sometimes like I get nervous in front of an audience, whether it's streaming or even IRL, and I always like, think to myself, like how can I get rid of like the stage fright, and everyone's different of how they can handle stage fright. Like for me, it's always like like just be yourself, and just if something scuff happens, just roll with it. And if you kind of in a way like don't know what to say or how to say, it's always good to like bounce it off of the audience, or even like think of something that maybe you haven't touched on, and that kind of stuff. Which with my interviews, oh, you have a question, or you just oh sorry. So with what, well, let me ask you this. Who is your favorite VTuber? Yeah, like, well, if anyone wants to answer, like, who is a favorite VTuber? Yes.
Well, not quite as many, but one of them I would say is Irenos, just based on how much charisma that she has and she brings into her streams, and then also just how great of a person that she is, and
But
yeah, all the energy that she brings and how much fun it is, and how much passion that she has into what she's doing.
that's cool. I love Iron Mouse. Like I watched her like for years, and then seeing like even the subathon. Oh no, it's all good. It's all good. Like it woke me up a little bit. Sorry, it woke me up a little bit. So, and which is the interview. Uh, and this is where the stuff happening right now, as my brain just kind of farted for a little bit. I'm trying to get the windows in my brain to reboot, and then try to confirm words. And now I'm ready. What's up?
So my favorite VTuber is Sensei, but I just want to throw that out there. It's a Japanese one.
Oh, okay.
But how have you had any like experiences when you're interviewing someone that something went wrong, or like can you name some like bad experiences and some good experiences?
I mean, a lot of my interviews are always a good experience because it helps me to like look back, and even like videos that I watch back on my interviews. It's kind of like a helping tool for me to like see how I done an interview, because I always like I will admit, like there's some times like an interview I rewatch and I'm like, oh my god, like I'm just like a nervous wreck, or I did a scuff and I was like, oh my god, or maybe I, kind of like made an oopsie on like what I'm saying something, or I'm just gibbering words, or I'm like stumble with my words. And like rewatching your videos is also a great tool of being your own critic. It's also a great way for you to look at your videos and be like, okay, let's see how I did this interview. And then you rewatch and be like, oh, okay, I need to rework on managing my time better, or maybe I need to work how I asked this set question, or maybe I did this and maybe I need to replace that. That also is a great tool of helping me to improve better as an interviewer. Like to this day, there's still every day is a new day to learn new things. Like how to ask someone a question, or even technology, like with OBS, or even with a microphone or a webcam, or even green screen, or how to ask a question, like how to time manage, or how to structure, like oh, these sets of questions are like the easy favorites questions, like ice-breaking questions, or the middle part is like the origin questions, like how did you get into VTubing, what is the inspiration of your design, or how did you got into being who you are today. And then the hard questions is like the most like the hard-hitting questions, well, what is the most difficult part in terms of being a content creator? Like what are the struggles and the challenges you face as a VTuber? Because each of VTuber, and even as a content creator, we all have our own journeys and struggles and obstacles. Even I have obstacles, that how we overcome that, or even some that we're still ongoing of that, and kind of learning like how to maneuver around them. And those also like how I structure those questions, like just do it by little groups, like okay, this 5 is the easy ones, these 5s are the middle ones, and these 5 are kind of how to end the show. And sometimes I don't follow the structure. Sometimes like there's someone like has a question that I'm like kind of eager to ask. Like they talk about, let's say like I interviewed somebody and they talked about that they own a restaurant. I'm like, well, I would love to know about that restaurant. Can you tell me more about your restaurant? What do you do? Like, what is the food you make? How do you make that said food? It's always something that also as well is a learning experience of learning about your guest. And your guest is also, any of them helps you on how you can improve on your interviews. Because sometimes as you ask, like, there's some that go wrong. I mean, sometimes I will say, like, maybe sometimes like I didn't have enough time to ask all my questions. Or maybe there's some that I forgot to ask, and it's not bad to make mistakes. We all make mistakes, in terms of being a content creator, or even as an interviewer, that like forgetting and being forgetful of questions and such. So it's always like, don't be afraid, of that. Always take that as a learning experience of being an interviewer, or even a talk show. Like mine is more question based, that I would like to ask you questions and then learn about your content. And then probably there's another one that is more of a talk
based, where it's just more or less of like learning on a talkative matter. Yes.
I'm just wondering if you've ever heard this interviewer. He does mainly like music
Huh?
but his name is Nardwar.
Yes. Love their content. Only watched them briefly, but I've heard of them. You know, like not familiarized with them, but I have like watched briefly of them.
Like, have you ever tried to like almost like take some little inspirations from him? Because like I've seen some of his interviews and they're very like detailed.
Hmm.
But like I say, his main selling point was just like he just knows some like background information that like some people don't know.
Right.
So I'm not saying like you just dig so deeply into that VTubers
Huh?
thing, but I would say like maybe like you bring up like kind of like a funny moment that you kind of like make a joke about,
Yeah.
and it just like goes on from there.
Yeah, yeah. Which I'll definitely check them out. I mean, I'm always open to any interviewer and like how they do their formulas and like how they do it or how they get through like some of like the situations. If you have a scuff, like how they handle it, or maybe there's a microphone malfunction, like how do you handle it, or maybe there's something that you kind of like have a brain for, like how do they handle it. It's always good to take a lot of those tips and tricks from other interviewers of how they handle that same thing and be like, okay, maybe I could do this, and get through that. Which I, also open to any kind of interviewers. I mean, I've seen there's a lot of interviewers today compared to like back in 2020. There was only like maybe a little bit of it. Now there's a lot of interviewers in the VTubing community, and that's amazing because the world of VTubing is large, and we would love to have more creators that brings the VTuber into a spotlight for maybe those that are unaware of that said VTuber. And these interviewers are kind of an important role in the community to help the viewers to learn of that VTuber, because I never knew that there was a firefly that's part of the Yokasa. I never knew that there was a VTuber that is a lamp, like a literal lamp. And even some that's a literal palm tree, even a couch. I never knew of it until I've seen other interviewers conduct some of their interviews of said VTuber. Like, wow, that is pretty cool. I want to talk to them and learn about them, And that's how interviewers is in the VTuber community. They help us to learn about the world of VTubing, and also to bring the VTuber into a spotlight for those that are kind of interested of that said VTuber. Like maybe there's some want to know more of like, let's say, bug VTubers, or maybe ones that's ghosts or supernatural, or just any form of like VTubers. There's always going to be a VTuber, but it's always out there, and the interviewers kind of scavenge and look around and like, oh my god, I found a VTuber that I want to know more, and then maybe I can have my audience learn about them, because all of us have different types of VTubers that we are thinking of, like, oh, is there this type of VTuber, or is there this type of VTuber? I mean, there's always a VTuber of anything, from what I've seen of experiences, slimes, lava lamps, literal chicken nugget is also a VTuber, or even a cake, even like anything that comes into a VTuber. It's extraordinary of the world of VTubers. And each of those interviews that I've conducted within these past 2 years has been extraordinary, because each of them has a different story. Each of them has their own experiences of how they be VTubers. Each of them have their own journeys. Some of them want to be Twitch partners. Some of them want to graduate and get a master's in university, or even some that would love to have this as a full-time career. Each of them have a story that gets us invested of learning more about the said VTuber. And I myself appreciate each of my guests because each of them has helped me along the way. And I very much apologize that I just kind of rambled for a little bit, but at the same time, I love my job as an interviewer. Because back then, I was a lonely kid with a social awkwardness, and I was afraid to talk to somebody. But when I did these interviews, it helped me to be open up to talk to people, to interact with people, even people that I've never able to interact with from the different parts of the world. It helped me of how I talk and how I will ask questions, or even how to interact with that said person, or form friendships, or how to, learn about, the music industry, or any type of industry that you don't know behind the scenes, but, with the VTubers, they have many knowledge that is still ever growing. And it's something that I and other interviewers love to learn more is everyone's stories. And there's still more to go. And with that, if there are any further questions, I would love to answer them. I apologize for kind of a scuff panel, but I am excited and I'm happy and I appreciate the opportunity that I received from OffKai Expo. It is a great convention, especially, it's VTubers and everyone's meeting each other from the internet when we're stuck at COVID and all that stuff. And then now we're finally in a convention, after 2 years of being stuck in a room watching VTubers and be like, oh, look, what is my schedule today? Oh, no, I can't leave because COVID lockdown. I guess I gotta stay in my bedroom now. Sorry, but now it is an exciting thing to learn more about VTubers. And VTubers is still growing. It is still a new thing, but it's an amazing world that is still growing. New resources, more VTubers coming in, debuts. As probably this day today, there might be some debuts that's happening that maybe you don't know of. The VTubing world is still expanding, and even to the outside world, people are noticing in the mainstream. And each VTuber is unique. You all VTubers and anyone is like a rainbow fish in a pond. It is very gorgeous and shiny, and there will be people that will look at this fish and be like, wow, this is amazing. I want to learn more about this fish, And it's like interviewers, you see a VTuber and you eager to learn about that VTuber and learn of their stories. And with that being said, I am very, very happy to do this panel. And even with my nervousness now and stumbling my words and such, I have the highest of pleasure to talk to each and every one of you, and I'm thankful to each of you.
We love you!
Oh my God. Thank you to each and every one of you. I appreciate you coming here today, and I appreciate you coming to my first IRL panel. And I hope you guys have a wonderful day at OffKai Expo. And just remember, as I say this, remember to stay awesome. Much love to your homies, and I'll see you guys next time. Adios. Peace.